Welcome aboard TED Talks Cruises, the podcast where wanderlust meets wisdom. Join our two hosts on a cruising adventure full of laughter, learning, and luxury. Ken Conan is a cruise rookie. He's wide-eyed, full of questions, and maybe still figuring out which end is aft. Ted Blank is a seasoned cruise expert who's been there, done that, and he even has a preferred deck chair. Each week, Ted and Ken dive into the world of cruising, from picking the right itinerary to insider tips, their personal insights, and behind-the-scenes secrets. Whether you're planning your first cruise or you're a platinum tier cruiser looking for fresh perspectives, TED Talks Cruises brings relatable stories, helpful advice, and plenty of good vibes. So get ready to laugh, learn, and set sail. No passport required.
Hey, it's Ken with TED Talks Cruises. Thanks for joining us today. I am the travel rookie. We've got our expert with us, Mr. Ted Blank. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me on the program today. I'm excited to talk about our topic today, and it's kind of the old saying, the early bird gets the worm, and in this case, the early bird gets a cool cruise and all sorts of other stuff, potentially. I'm excited to dig into this.
Yeah. You know, it's always so funny because I live in a world in which most people don't live. And not only do I live here in the TED Talks Cruises bunker, deep below the streets of Hudson, Wisconsin,
yes.
In a secret location, but I never know what year it is.
Nice.
Because I'm living in 2025. I'm booking trips in 2026. I'm booking trips in 2027. I'm even starting to book some trips in 2028. Wow. And so my calendar on my desk has like 3 years taped up there. And it's so interesting when I talk to people because then I'll be interviewed maybe on the radio or something like that, and folks will say, well, hey, it's November, and where are we going to go for Christmas vacation? And I'm like, I did that 2 years ago. We're well past that point there. So I live in a very different world than a lot of people who maybe don't travel too much live in, and it's that world of planning ahead for travel. And so I thought that'd be a good little topic for us to kind of address today.
I love it. We had talked a while back about, because Shannon and I have taken some kind of last minute trips, which are super exciting, but there's something about the anticipation. I don't know, really know how to describe it, but it's super fun. Like a year in advance, you're thinking, wow, we're going to the Rhine River next year. We're gonna cruise the Med in the spring. Like this is gonna be, there's something about that anticipation.
Or you're reading along in the newspaper, or you're reading something online. You're like, oh look, there's an article about the Acropolis in Athens. Hey, we're gonna be there next year.
Right.
It's interesting. There are psychological studies that have been done. So take them for what they're worth. But psychological studies have been done that said that anticipation is one of the top, drivers of satisfaction for travel.
Interesting.
The more anticipation you have, the more satisfying that trip is. And I think I can totally relate to it personally. And I also see it from my clients. Yeah. And as they start to get their trips booked, and then they start to think about what they're going to do while they're traveling, they get really excited about it. Because it is fun. It's a lot more fun than buying a new refrigerator or something like that. Wow, that's going to look really great where the old refrigerator was. Yeah. But that anticipation is just huge. And I think sometimes we forget about that. And sometimes, folks just get caught up in their day-to-day lives and, travel, they'd love to do it, but other things get in the way. Yeah. And so I totally understand how people don't necessarily put themselves into the, I should be thinking about my vacation. Probably if I don't have something planned for 2026 at this point, I'm kind of behind the curve. Yeah. And I should be thinking about 2027. Right. And it's a little bit of the difference, too, between, maybe the people who have a good financial plan for their retirement. And they've thought about it. They've thought ahead about it. They have kind of a plan they're working towards. Yeah. And I think travel is the same way. And, besides our house, besides our car, maybe besides our kids, that's the item we spend the most money on every year is travel.
Interesting.
And so we should treat it with, seriousness and respect. Yeah. And so, that's what we certainly try to do for our clients. But I think it's just a different mindset maybe for people, especially younger people. Yeah. They may not be able to look that far out into the horizon, but I would really encourage people to be thinking further and further ahead.
I love it. When you think about kind of tips that would be important when you're starting to think about that, maybe I'll just start with this question. Are there certain areas like Alaska or Europe cruises or larger med cruises or world cruises? Do each of those have kind of different time frames that we should start to think of? Like, oh, if we're thinking Alaska, at least a year. Is that are they all the same? You should just be booking.
Yeah, so you can book a trip to Alaska a month before you go.
Really?
That is possible.
Okay.
But let me back up now
Yeah.
a little bit and talk about the people who book it 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
Well, they have the full menu of choices available to them. That's the full menu of staterooms on the ship. So we can choose the stateroom that most fits their need.
Yeah.
Not one of 4 left, and 3 of them are across from the laundromat, and one is in the elevator lobby. And people chuckle, and it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And those good staterooms go very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Suites, another example. Those suites go first. Ships sell from the top down.
Interesting.
So if you're going with your family, if you want that extra space, that suite's probably going to be the first stateroom to be gone.
Interesting.
So the folks who plan ahead, first of all, they have the most choices available to them. And I think when you think about a trip of a lifetime, whether it's Alaska, whether it's the Mediterranean, whether it's the South Pacific, whether it's, the Baltic, you are thinking about this as a trip of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Most people aren't like me, and they aren't going to go back to Alaska twice a year for the rest of their lives. And so they are thinking about it as a trip of a lifetime. And it's really important that everything be done, everything work well, everything be planned well.
Yeah.
And so the more choices we have, the better we can plan things. Now, the corollary to that is that the earlier you book, generally speaking, the rule of thumb is that the pricing is going to be more attractive.
Oh.
Yep.
Wow. So not only a bunch of
more
options,
choices
but
and
pricing.
better pricing. And so those are really probably the 2 main reasons to be thinking ahead, better selection and better pricing. And I always chuckle when somebody says, when is the best time to book an airline ticket?
Yeah.
And my answer always was last month.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. If you're planning on a trip to Europe, a cruise to Europe, when those flights come available for purchase about 10 months before travel, that's when the prices are going to be the lowest.
Really? So there's
when
not
you're 6 months in, 6 months, halfway between a completely empty plane and a completely full plane, you don't have as much give and take in there.
Yeah.
Business class, sometimes it sells out, so it is important. And a lot of people I just think don't necessarily have that in their heads. So the average booking window for a trip to Alaska is probably 9 to 12 months.
Okay.
But it's right now we're taping this in September of 2025, and there are 2028 Alaska cruises already available for sale.
Wow.
And already selling.
Wow.
And those early birds who book it today are getting those prime stateroom locations.
Sure.
Another example, I'm working with a client who's going on a world cruise.
Yeah.
So it's a cruise all the way around the world. And she's very specific in what they want for their staterooms.
Okay.
And the world cruise doesn't leave until January of 2028. And we're really struggling to find a stateroom that meets her requirements.
Wow.
Think about that.
That's crazy.
January 28, we're 3 full years almost away. Well, almost 2.5 years in advance of that, and it's down
Tough
to
find
it's kind of slim pickings.
Wow.
So that's I think something really important. So Alaska 9 to 12 months.
Okay.
I would say if you can do 12 to 18 months, that's really the sweet spot.
Okay.
But right now, this fall, we are very busy booking trips to Alaska next summer.
Okay.
And there's plenty of space available.
Yeah.
Some of the tours on some of the dates are actually already going to be sold out.
The excursions you're talking about?
Well, the land tours, the cruise tours.
Oh,
the Denali extensions and things like that.
Got it.
So, this is a good time to be booking it. Europe, I tend to think 12 to 18 months is a pretty good time frame.
Okay.
If you're going for a winter escape to the Caribbean, on a cruise, there's plenty of availability now for cruises that are going to be leaving in January, February, March.
Okay.
But again, we're starting to get into the kind of the slim pickings. So maybe a good rule of thumb is the further away you go from home, the longer you should plan ahead. And the smaller the ship you're thinking about, you should also be planning far ahead.
Okay.
Now, river cruises are a little different. So river cruises, they tend to be sold out, I would say, almost a year in advance.
What?
So as we're sitting here in September of 2025, looking ahead to 2026, there are a lot of cruises that are sold out already.
Wow.
And most of the river cruise lines are, between 80 and 95% booked up. So anything that's left is going to be, onesies and twosies in a few locations. And even, Viking Cruises that has 100 ships on the rivers of Europe. they're pretty much locked down for 2026 already. So we're starting to think about 2027. So that's why my mind is like in these strange, is that like a new presidential administration in 20? I mean, you're thinking so far ahead that it is very, it's a little cognitive dissonance for me. And so the smaller the cruise is, the further it sells out. Another great example would be some of the guided tours, in Europe in particular, like companies like Tauk and Insight and Luxury Gold. Some of them are full already.
So these are motor coach
the guided motor coach
tours,
and especially the small group, pretty in-depth exclusive tours. They go right away.
Wow.
Sometimes tour companies will announce a date. Here's our season for this tour. We have 6 departures, and within a couple weeks they're gone. So we actually have a lot of wait lists for tours.
That's
like
crazy.
that. So yes, people don't. I don't think a lot of people realize that unless they, kind of live it and breathe it. And there was a time back in the day when I think the cruise lines in particular got into kind of last minute discounting.
Yes.
And a lot of people would kind of play that roulette game and say, I'm going to wait, and, I'm sure something better is going to come along.
Yep.
And once in a blue moon, it does.
Yep.
And in particular, if you're looking at the really big mega ship cruises sailing out of Florida, Texas, places like that, they're so big, there's kind of almost always space available. So they're going to work at the end to fill that last stateroom up, because cruise ships never sail empty. They always sail at 100% occupancy. So once in a while, there'll be some promotions in there that are kind of last minute. Sometimes there are cruises that just don't hit for some reason, and so the cruise lines will have some kind of attractive pricing on that. But if you ever see those ads online, 45% off the cruise, and you kind of click on the star and you kind of read it, it's a pretty narrow focused set of cruises that for some reason have just not hit very well. And so if you're looking for a value, and that's what's going to drive you to say, hey, if I can save $1,000 on this cruise, I'm going to go instead of sitting at home and doing nothing, more power to you. And we can sure help, guide you to some of those last minute savings where they're available. But most people, if they're planning to go to Europe in 2026 or 2027, they're planning to go to Europe in 2026 or 2027. And we want to make sure that they have the best experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. The thing about the airline tickets, is that standard, the 10-month window? Is that how typically
so
that
airlines
goes?
publish their schedules about 10 months in advance. Some do it a little differently, but generally speaking, the regular airlines run on about a 10-month cycle. Knowing full well that whatever they published 10 months in advance may or may not actually reflect what they operate 10 months into the future, because the downside is that there are going to be a lot of schedule changes. But those schedule changes sometimes happen 3-4 days before departure anyway. Wow. So, the last minute folks are going to be, experiencing those schedule changes as well.
Sure. That's crazy. So not to get too in the weeds, but how does it work? So I come in, I book a cruise with you guys for 2 years out. We kind of lightly keep in touch, and then 10 months out or so, you're going to be like, hey, Ken, tickets for airlines, let's start talking. Is that how that goes?
Yeah. So because of this long booking window, a couple things happen. The first thing is that generally there's a deposit collected when you make the booking. And that can range anywhere from $25 up to, 10% of the price of the trip. Just depends on the different company and their different policy.
Sure.
And then the final payment date can be anywhere between a year before you travel and maybe 90 days before you travel. And so in between there, we've worked really hard to kind of come up with some pretty consistent processes so that we flag for our clients, hey, here's the date where we're going to reach out to you and start to talk to you about flights.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's time to start looking at a pre and a post cruise hotel stay.
Yeah.
Your cruise is leaving from Rome. Let's put something together for you in Rome so you can see the city before you get on the cruise.
For sure.
Reservations for restaurants, shore excursions, all those things. A lot of those have opening dates.
Okay.
So one of the things we do is we flag those for our clients so that we can remind them when it's time to do that.
Awesome.
And they don't have to have a calendar by their kitchen refrigerator with all the dates on it. We help them remember those things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it is a pretty complicated operation when it all comes down to it. This checklist, it's a digital checklist, but it's pretty impressive. There are a lot of moving pieces in these different reservations.
That's cool. And you talk about, again, just kind of sticking with the theme of payment, talk about there's some sort of deposit, $25 to 10%. if a guy wants to we run a budget at our house, so we want to keep consistent. Can we start to make payments?
Yeah.
Or is it just you can?
Yeah, you can make payments in advance, and that's not going to affect the refundability.
Okay.
There will be different refund policies based on the specific dates on the calendar.
Yeah.
But if you prepay before that final payment, if you want to pay $1,000 a month or whatever, if you were to cancel, the standard refund policy would still apply.
Oh, wow. That's great.
That's kind of nice.
I like that a lot.
And for folks who want to, keep their money in the stock market or keep it in their money market, they don't have to pay until it's time to pay.
You can do that as well.
Yeah, okay. And you can, the stock market's doing pretty well, so you can make enough money to pay for your cruise if you want to. If you're a clever investor or have a good financial advisor to help you out.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Awesome. Any other tips as far as kind of the early bird getting the worm? Any other things that you'd say? Another thing we should probably talk about or highlight.
Yeah, I would say one exception to that rule would be single travelers.
Oh, okay.
And so single travelers who want to go on cruises, they will always pay a single supplement because they're renting an entire cabin just for one person.
Sure.
So the price of a cruise is really the price of the cabin, and instead of dividing it by 2, they're dividing it by 1.
Got it.
But a lot of cruise lines have realized that there's a market for single travelers out there.
Yeah.
And so, between 2 and 8 months before a cruise departs, they will often send us a list of sailings that have a reduced single supplement or no single supplement.
Oh.
But those tend to be closer in to the travel dates. But on the flip side, some cruise lines have also added specific staterooms that are designed for single occupancy.
Oh.
And I said the suites sell out first. Ken, I lied to you. It's actually those single staterooms that sell out first.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I lied to you. Sorry, but so single travelers, it's a little different. I know. We'll have to have a true confession this podcast next time. But that's where single travelers are maybe a little different exception to that rule. The other thing I would say is if you're traveling with a family or a large group, you 1,000% want to be on the early side of that booking window.
Okay.
Because you are going to find, hey, we want 4 staterooms next to each other. Well, that's not always possible.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those things that make a family trip, add to the complexity of the logistics. If you're coming in when half the ship is sold or 3/4 of the ship is sold, it's going to be too late probably for a lot of those special requests.
Interesting. All right, a little side note here. Are you finding more of the family, grandma and grandpa, and then the kids, and then the grandkids? Is that a newer trend? It seems like I'm hearing more about that. Are you guys seeing that?
It's been a trend.
Yeah,
it exploded right after COVID.
Oh,
that was huge. Those first year after COVID, everybody was doing that. And then it kind of took maybe a little bit of a step back, but now it is definitely, a pretty big part of the business. And you've been to Alaska. I've been to Alaska. You always see those big multi-generational families in Alaska.
For sure.
Because it is the perfect spot for that multi-generational trip, I think.
Yeah, that's a good take. Good take. Awesome. We were also going to talk about in the episode today
our newsletter.
The newsletter.
Our e-newsletter.
Yes.
Yeah. So for folks who don't subscribe to our e-newsletter, it's got a really clever name. It's called TED Talks Cruises.
Drum roll, please.
Drum roll.
TED Talks Cruises.
Yeah, TED Talks Cruises. So we're real
brand.
clever with our branding here.
We're on brand.
Yeah, very clever with our branding. But one of the things that I do, in my profession is I'm always looking at cruises. I'm booking several cruises a week and talking to folks about cruises. And as I look for cruises and research cruises or new cruises are introduced, I find some that I think are kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I kind of just have a mental file where I file those away.
Yeah.
Well, what we do in our weekly newsletter, which is called TED Talks Cruises, now is I take some of those cruises that I think are really cool for some reason. Maybe it's a really unique destination, unique ship, good time of the year to go, some great value associated with that cruise. And we put them in our newsletter, give you the details about the ship, the details about the itinerary, a little bit of info on the pricing. There's a link at the bottom where you can click and schedule an appointment with myself or one of my teammates, and we'll get you booked on those cruises. So it's a chance to kind of, go through the Rolodex of my mind and my team's mind and, see some cruises that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily thought about, or learn about some cruise lines you wouldn't have necessarily learned about. So we send it out every Thursday. Our marketing guy tells me it's a 3-minute read. So we'll have to test that out sometime. I must be yeah. I'm not a pretty fast reader, but yeah. So it's just kind of a neat way to get a sense as to what I'm seeing out there, what folks are liking, and it's just kind of a fun thing to do. So we'd encourage folks, if you haven't subscribed to that, we'll pop the link in the comments below. Yeah. And we're going to start doing some webinars coming up here later this year and in 2026. So we'll maybe take a little deeper dive into some of the cruise lines and some of the destinations. So folks who want to learn more about, hey, I've heard about Viking, but I don't know much about it. Or I've always wanted to go to Alaska, but I don't know, where do I start? We're going to do some webinars that hopefully will provide some education about that as well. So they'll be announced in that TED Talks Cruises newsletter. So if you don't subscribe, please go ahead and do.
I love how yourself and the firm, you guys do a really good job of educating folks and really just telling the story about Alaska or river cruises or wherever it is. And then folks get to kind of figure out what's the best fit, if any.
Yeah.
What works for myself, my family. I've got 2 kids. They're older. How does this look? Hats off to you guys. I think you do a great job of just telling folks about it and really more of an educational moment for people.
Yeah, it is. And it's I think one of the things that we do a little differently than, some folks. A lot of folks are like dates, budget,
right,
let's go.
Yeah.
And we really want to have a conversation to get started and learn about you, learn about why do you want to go to Alaska? Why do you want to go to the Mediterranean? What do you want to see? It's amazing what we uncover about our clients.
Yeah.
We'll have folks who are saying, oh, I'd like to go on a river cruise to Europe, and we'll kind of start to get in the why. And all of a sudden, well, my grandfather served in World War II. Or I have relatives who are from this particular spot.
Yeah.
And we can really make sure that cruise, not only you're picking the right cruise for you, but that experience that you want to have, that place you want to see, that restaurant you want to dine at, that beer you want to try, we're going to make sure you have that as part of that. And so that is part of the journey and part of the education and part of what we do.
That's awesome. I always feel like I should mention this, and I know I've mentioned it a ton before, but there's no extra cost to talk to and work with anyone at Ted Blank Travel.
Correct.
No extra cost.
Correct.
And if anything, you're going to get extra benefits, there's so many additional things you get by partnering with a firm like yours that just folks don't realize. And it just blew me away.
Yeah, it boggles my mind that people would want to try to do some of these things themselves.
Right.
Because the amount of time we spend on a lot of these trips, and imagine if you were having to do it yourself.
You're the pros.
We're the pros. And these trips are complicated for us. And even sometimes simple bookings can really become complicated when people don't, there's a lot that goes into that if you don't start out right, it's not going to end well.
Right.
And so, I think people think, oh, click, click, boom, done.
Yep.
I would be much happier to have someone else do that for me, help me guide me through it, and make sure I'm making the right choice. And I know what the choices are so that I can make them rather than pop onto a ship and be totally surprised by what happens.
Yeah, I've got a saying, I'm a big fan of no surprises.
Mm-hmm.
I like some, but when it comes to a travel and a trip and I'm laying out a fair amount of money, I don't want some surprise at a port where all of a sudden I'm just caught like, oh gosh.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Or you get on the ship and all of a sudden you have this, well, what's this bill for? I didn't know I was going to be nickel and dimed.
Right.
And that's important.
Yeah. Awesome. How can we get anything else on the newsletter at all? Or
nope, you can sign up for the newsletter. We'll pop the link in the comments below. And for folks who are starting to think about 2027, 2028, reach out. Great time to be doing that. And if you still don't have any plans for 2026, don't let the grass grow under your feet, because it's getting to be crunch time for 2026.
That's awesome. And as always, like and subscribe below. We appreciate that. This is TED Talks Cruises. Again, Ken Conan and Mr. Ted Blank. Thanks for joining me today, sir.
Thank you.